welcome everyone tonight on this beautiful night. Thank you for coming. I'm Peggy, and I'm president of Historic Pittsford. Historic Pittsford and the Village Comprehensive Plan Update Committee are sponsoring this forum series. This is the fourth in our series, and we've opened it up to the public, but our focus has been on educating the Comp Plan Committee about issues related to our little historic village and giving us some information so that we can plan for the future. I'd like to introduce Tom Cummings, who is president or chairman of our Comp Plan Committee, and he'll introduce the participants. Thank you.
We're here to talk about the economy. We've had previous talks about historic preservation and about traditional neighborhood design and about transportation. And this one, we're focusing on a vibrant village economy. And we're lucky to have three distinguished speakers with us. I'll introduce them all at the same time, I guess. And then we'll bring them up one by one. Laura Hackathorn is a trustee from the village of Hamburg, and I believe she's also a business owner and in the village. David Woods is an AICP certified planner. David is on the far end, and current chair of the village of Geneseo Planning Board. And Shaun Logue, is that correct? Is a planning associate with MRB Group. And again, the reason we're doing this is when we have our community events, we're going to have a lot of opportunity for people who live here to say what they would like to see and how should things be. The purpose tonight is to hear from some outside experts, some people who have faced similar challenges in their work, and we're glad they're here. So, first up is Laura, and I won't read the whole introduction, but give me just a second. I'll do some of your background. Served on the Board of Trustees for the Village of Hamburg since her election in 2004. She is Board Liaison to Economic Development, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Village Court System. And earlier, Laura was a volunteer on the award-winning New York State Route 62. That's their village's Main Street project, and a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. Please welcome Laura Hackathorn.
Well, I am thrilled to be here tonight, and I really see that your community is doing something right. That is, bringing you all together to hear the same information so you're on the same page as you embark on this journey of updating your comprehensive plan. So, great job, leadership here. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got started. In 2001, I read in my local paper that Route 62 is going to be full depth road reconstruction, storefront to storefront, new sidewalks, new roads, new curbing, full depth, so sewers, water, etc. And I live a block from Main Street, and there was a local meeting at the public school, and I attended that. And I saw Dan Burden while I was there. Not sure if any of you are familiar with Dan Burden, but he talks about walkable communities. And so the DOT at the time was not very forward-thinking, if I may say that. They were going to move more traffic. That was their job. They were going to widen the road, left turn lanes. And our demographics in the village are lots of school children and elderly. And so it seemed a bit treacherous, what they wanted to do to our village and our community. That really wasn't our brand. We are a family place, a safe place. So Dan Burden talked about traffic calming and offered all types of road design solutions for that. So the village came together and we convinced the DOT to go with the traffic calming road design. And back then, roundabouts were considered kind of crazy and radical. We wanted 4. So we took out signals, and people were really up in arms about it. They had signs in their lawns, no roundabouts. I remember walking my kindergartner to school, and a man screaming across the street, no roundabouts. And my son saying to me, "Mommy, was he yelling at you?" No, honey, just keep walking, it's fine. So anyway, traffic calming road design, and you know, as I came to Pittsford today and drove in, you know, you do have some of the elements. Do you have you don't have any roundabouts here or anything like that, right? No. No.
We're in the process of doing a pedestrian safety plan that will make improvements to each of the arteries leading to the four corners with refuge aisles and other things for traffic calming purposes.
Oh, great.
We also had in Urban here in 2004,
Awesome.
and our original traffic calming plan was written by Dan Burton.
Oh, wonderful. I can't, you'll see as we go through this, I can't tell you enough the quality of life change it made in our community. It completely transformed it into a kinder, gentler community. But we'll get to that. So this is our main intersection, Main and Buffalo Street. That's our main street. As you can see, we have gardens everywhere. Some of these pictures are a little bit older, but everything's filled in nicely. Believe it or not, this is, I'm sorry, this is, okay. This is Main and Buffalo Street, before and after. If you see that picture on the left, we were really downtrodden. That was really, you know, that wasn't that long ago. That was only about 10 years ago, believe it or not.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, same intersection. See the building, the big one on the big yellow side, and see how it's brick here on the right picture with the windows restored? We had one of our local developers come in and restore that building. It was going to collapse. Nick Tetzo and companies out of the city of Buffalo. But you can see that in the 70s, they had slicked this terrible plaster all over the side of the building.
What's in that shop?
To the right?
Yeah.
That's called Staub Square. Tony Staub, a local business owner, actually owned a machine shop across town. And he was inspired about everything we were doing. And actually, we were looking for people to participate in our New York State Main Street grant. And he participated. He was one of the 6 original people who participated. Actually, my store is in that building. Small plug. So one of the most important ingredients in our revitalization are building design guidelines, and I have to thank Bob Corby for that. He did our reconnaissance level survey when he worked for Bureau Architecture, and one of the recommendations was you need design guidelines. And so we knew once we did the road design, redid the road to traffic calming, we knew we'd get a lot of investment. And Dan Burton had told us about this, to be prepared for investment. And what if all this investment came in and we had no design guidelines? You know, you could have lay people who really didn't know the proper materials or how to respect architecture and not to patch in small windows and maybe use drive it everywhere. You know, if we didn't set that standard, we'd be in trouble right now. We'd look like a mess. I didn't use Hamburg photos for this because I don't like to out any local businesses when I show this. So these are just stock photos. So what drives me, what is in the forefront of all my decisions as a public servant is the pedestrian experience. Now, this wasn't, this was kind of like a granola thing 10 years ago. They thought this was kind of crazy thinking. Because really no one was walking Main Street very much 10 years ago. And that was the problem. And everyone had gotten complacent. And in my lifetime, Main Street wasn't very walkable. Not like it was in the 40s and the 50s. We have a Hamburg mall. And of course, what happens to so many communities, it sucked the life out of Main Street. So when we design streetscape, we talk about the pedestrian envelope. And many of you probably know this, 5-foot sidewalks, 0 setback or close to it, 75% window glass first floor. We have awnings, traditional awnings. Then we have perpendicular signs, tree canopy, street poles. We usually have planters and pots on the side. and that cocoons the walker. And Bob Corby years ago took me on a walk, and he'd make me stop every few feet, and he'd ask me, how does this make you feel? This feels safe. When you're exposed and next to rushing traffic, it's a whole different feeling, isn't it? School kids, biking and walking. We wanted to retain our brand. And we didn't even know what that was 10 years ago. We had to ask ourselves, who is the village of Hamburg? We knew that we wanted to be like East Aurora, which is this lovely historic town not too far away. And, we found out that we don't want to be like East Aurora, we want to be like Hamburg. So part of this has been developing a brand and then sticking to it. Walking and biking in a healthy community is very, very important to us. We actually hire crossing guards. I don't know if you have them here, and I remember as a mother, that was important to me. I'd walk my kindergartner to the corner, which was 2 houses away, while my baby was right behind me. It's looking out the window. I'd say, stand in the window and watch mommy walk to the corner. And I'd let my kindergartner walk. The crossing guard would wave to me. She'd say, I got her. And then she'd walk her to the next block, and the next crossing guard would take her. That's community building. Those are decisions we make every day. And we put bike racks everywhere. Well-maintained sidewalks, public-private partnership. We, the village municipality, buys really, really nice state-of-the-art sidewalk plows. It blows it off to the side. It does a really great job because we had to put our money where our mouth is. And if we support walkability, we better keep the sidewalks clean. So we made a commitment. We start in the central business district and go to the schools because they open up a little bit later. And then we work in concentric circles and take care of the village, which is about 2.5 square miles. Our population is about 9,600. Now, what we've done here is, I'm showing this picture because this and other business owners have been inspired by this walkability issue, and they've actually put in heated sidewalks. So now we have elderly that are in that block, and they can actually shop. They are not strapped to their home. They do not have to worry about slipping in these places. And that's a real commitment to the people that live in your community. Municipal decisions, safety, and comfort. In our design guidelines, one of the things we added was people spaces should not abut traffic spaces. And not that a car going 50 miles an hour couldn't run through those bushes. That's not the point. The point is it feels better. It's more inviting. And it's beautiful. And we can't really underestimate the beauty of the greenery. This is the same intersection, believe it or not. That is the one in the lower left is Legion and Buffalo Street for anyone who knows about Hamburg. Over asphalt, poorly maintained, wires everywhere. Now the sad thing is, our local high school is just off the picture to the left, and kids who live on the other side of the street were walkers. And they had to cross that asphalt jungle. And people would go, this is the town-village line. So this side, the right closest to me, it was 30 miles an hour. But just past the intersection, it went up to 40. So it wasn't a safe place. I would never let someone under, a certain age, 7 or 8, cross there. So what we did is we put a roundabout in, and most of the asphalt now is a public park. And as you can see, the Nick Charlotte's, the ice cream place in the lower left, there it is in the upper right. Same photo. So where that asphalt is in the upper right, we made it as a cul-de-sac. So now traffic can't run down any little kid getting ice cream. And we've provided shelter and benches. And we'll see people of all ages enjoying ice cream.
Is that a state road?
Yes, it is. It is. You know, funny thing that happened with our DOT, they were so inspired by the homework we did and the public participation that they started saying, well, why don't we put in an overlook? Why don't we add flowers? Why don't we put steps here? They brought on a wonderful, landscape architect that really went above and beyond. So yes, it's a state road, Route 62. Incorporate amenities. That is a library, a portable library. Don't know if you guys have those here, but it's take a book, leave a book. And you do, which is, you're the only other place that has it, the places I've presented. Great. Our local high school shop kids build those. And it just says something, like public art, it says something about your community and what you think is important. Now, the DOT added all of these other amenities and paid for all of these as part of our road project. The planters in the lower left, we borrowed the design from Elmwood Village in Buffalo. And it was the DOT's folks that said, let's put a game board in that little park. And believe it or not, and that this is not the cheapest bike rack you've ever seen. They paid for the extras. So we appreciated that.
Now, how far is that from the business area?
It is, I would say, from the main intersection, a mile.
Okay.
Yeah. So beautiful is important, and we put in, as the state and then the village, put in gardens, and it was inspiring. And leadership is about doing all of those things you'd like to see. For example, for years before, to kind of turn the tide, that this is our living space, this is our community, it's up to us how beautiful it is. I take a walk and pick up trash, just to make a point. I remember a lady saying to me, there's some litter around this intersection, and I'd say, you are absolutely right, and it should not be there, and I'll meet you here tomorrow morning at 9, and we'll clean it up together. And I don't think she came. Okay, connection to natural resources. Well, like you, we have water next to our village, and that is our 18-mile creek. And for many, many years, actually probably my whole life, that was overgrown. And that's right on our main street. And the DOT cleared it for us and said, well, why don't we build stairs for you? And why don't we make a path down to the water? And
Is this the same DOT?
yes, I know. That's why I have to, tell it like it is. This is the,
Who contacted DOT?
It was their project, and we had such a community participation. I just think it was this groundswell of momentum. The days before Pinterest, we would go, our Route 62 committee would drive to Lewiston, we'd drive to Pittsford, we'd drive to Niagara-on-the-Lake, and we'd take pictures. And we had a big 3-ring binder with all the sleeves, sounds very archaic now. We had a photo album. And we'd sit with the DOT for a meeting, and we'd just pull out the big photo album. And we'd say, we want this, this is what we want. And they listened. So historic preservation, we are a certified local government. I know all of Pittsford is a historic, national historic place, right? I don't even know the right term for here, but we were actually designated, now it's been 6 years, hard to believe. But of course, that was the decaying building in the lower left, and that made that project a go, because they got the tax credits. The middle picture, we actually had, that was a community project. We actually, actually that was my project. We called around to to get local materials donated, someone with an excavator. We had a local artisan make a wrought iron archway and gates. And we had someone teach us how to lay pavers, and it was a connectivity thing. to bring people from the parking lot behind, all the behind parking on Main Street, to the front of Main Street. And the DOT actually took that alleyway that we converted and did a big bulb out in a crosswalk as part of the road project. So I won't read all of these things to you, but I touched upon all of them. But our community absolutely transformed. We have events happening year-round and a very active business community. The business community was very much part of we had weekly meetings with all the business communities during the road project. So, commercial building permits issued. Village of Hamburg, 2004 to 2012. In 2004, we had 12. And we've had over 100 for the past few years. That's investment. I'll take a moment to tell you, there is retail springing up all over the village. But we find people are getting creative with building projects. And now we have to deal with like the abundance. For example, we have real tight parking. We have to redo some parking lots. We have property owners that want to build out to their lot line and use other people without regard to parking at all, and use everybody else's generosity. And so we're trying to figure that out. Increased traffic safety. The village has seen about a 90% drop in severe accidents and a 60% drop in accidents overall. You know, the road design creates a civility that we never knew would come. People are going so slowly that you're making eye contact and they're saying, no, you cross, no, go ahead and cross. And the pedestrians absolutely have the right of way, absolutely. And the cars that come through know it because they live there too and they want it to be safe. Public attitude toward roundabouts. Well, in a nutshell, people love them now. So here we go. Here's the scary picture that I showed you at the beginning. Main and Buffalo Street before 2008. And here it is now.
Wow.
To do that roundabout, did they have to acquire additional property?
They did. The state bought, we had some empty lots due to fire, just so happens. They didn't demo any buildings, but we had some pretty ugly corners that were important corners, but no one was building on them. Nobody was investing. So the DOT, paid these folks for pieces of their land. So they were compensated, and it was a win-win.
If you go back to the prior picture, how much of what we see disappeared? Like the yellow building, is that still there? Or is
That yellow building is that building.
Wow.
Same building.
Just a different facade and the tower?
Well, I have to say, there is a little bit of a cheat here. We require 2 and 3 stories, and this gentleman didn't want a second story. So those are empty windows. That's really not, but honestly, it's such an improvement. We know when to compromise. So all of that, yeah, completely new facade for sure, absolutely.
And what kind of stores are in those buildings?
Well, the one right behind the red vehicle is a restaurant called Juicy Burger Bar. It's quite a popular restaurant. They're doing quite well. Next to that is, a Prima Oliva. I'm sure you have the olive oil stores here. So there's a gorgeous retail store, and then there's a cafe. And then there's an atrium, and actually, My Lady's Boutique is in there too.
Do you have any everyday drugstores, grocery stores, the sort of thing that brings people downtown regularly?
I so wish we had a drugstore right here, but it's actually the next block up. We have a Rite Aid. We do. It's very walkable. It is the next block up. Our grocery store, is where that where that little library I was showing you and the ice cream place, our Tops Market is there. So it's all within a mile. All right?
Can
Oh.
I ask you a quick question?
Oh, sure.
I like roundabouts, but I've always found them sort of hard to cross as a pedestrian.
Okay.
How does that work since the traffic never has to stop?
They have to stop for pedestrians, so you certainly, I mean, you do have the laws on your side. But what I teach people and all the time is, don't be foolish and just say, well, I have the right of way, I'm playing chicken. You know, you stop and you make eye contact like a stop sign, like crossing at any stop sign intersection.
I mean, I walk here all the time, and I have to wave.
We wave.
To get them to
That's
stop.
okay. We wave, and then we say thank you, and it does. It's and you know, walk with confidence, because if you hold back like you're timid, but if you make eye contact and say I'm crossing now.
I wonder if the whole principle of traffic calming is to create a physical environment that's conducive to drivers slowing down. And part of the problem that we have in this village is back in the 1980s, DOT widened our streets, and that width encourages speed. So the improvements that we're making as part of the pedestrian safety plan are all about necking it down. And one of the reasons roundabouts work, especially the ones in Hamburg, is because they have 10-foot lanes. And the fastest that you can go, if you're in a Maserati, the fastest you can go through a roundabout is about 20 miles per hour. So you have more time to react and to stop when you see a pedestrian. And that's one of the reasons they're much safer to cross.
Yes, and you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, the 10-foot lanes, but what I saw maybe you can consider here out front, we have then painted red the safety lanes. Now, we don't have 6 feet available, so we can't call them bike lanes by law, but they are safety lanes. So when I got out of I parked in the street in front of the library, so when I got out of my car, the traffic was next to me.
Right.
The only thing between me and the traffic was a stripe. And in our village, we have 4 feet painted red, and it feels better. It just feels better. This is a couple more before picture, and this is after. Another before, after. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. We'll have some time, we hope, at the end for questions from everyone on the panel. And Shaun is next? Who's next? David is next? Let me give you a proper introduction. I'll make it short. David Woods has worked for 32 years as a professional planner in local government in Western New York, and the last 22 years as Livingston County Planning Director. In retirement, he continues his involvement in planning, serving as chair of the Village of Geneseo Planning Board and playing an active role in the village's code review committee, including drafting new village code language. He has lots of credits here. I'm not going to read them all. Please welcome David Woods.
Can I safely just get that out of the way? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. We'll change the focus a little bit. In my remarks, I want to give you a picture of how the Village of Geneseo and the Town of Geneseo have approached changing their zoning laws, updating the codes, and specifically try to relate that to some of the issues that Laura talked about in terms of urban design, walkability, pedestrian use, and economic revitalization of a small village. Village of Geneseo, you may be familiar with, is the county seat of Livingston County. The combined town and village population is about 10,000, of which about 3/4 live in the village. SUNY Geneseo is the largest employer within the village and the second largest in the county as a whole. The heart of Geneseo is our Main Street, and it also is designated as a Main Street Historical District, and that's very important to the community. We have a very active local historic preservation group, APOG, the Association for the Preservation of Geneseo. They were instrumental in the designation of the Main Street Historic District, and they've also been involved in a number of other important community projects and activities, including the replacement of our famous bear fountain in the middle of the village at the intersection of Main Street and Center Street. It was taken out by a truck that failed to make a turn quite properly a few years ago. And after quite a lot of controversy and local fundraising, it was replaced. And actually the stone basis of the previous fountain has been repurposed and is being made into benches, which will now be located around the community. So we're very happy about that. Our Main Street has been relatively healthy over the previous years. There was a number of, quite a lot of concerns some time back about the impact of commercial development out on Route 20A, how that would compete with Main Street businesses, particularly when Walmart came in. Walmart is known in many communities as a Main Street killer. In our case, we were fortunate for a number of reasons, but Walmart did not kill the Main Street, but it certainly did cause a realignment of the type of businesses that are there. One symptom we would take as a sign of the health, when vacancies do occur, they very rarely stay there for very long. Somebody will come in and fill that empty space, and that is an important factor. A lot's been done in recent years by both the village and private businesses and private property owners. We also had a New York Main Street grant that looked at building facades and facade improvements, signage. But a key part of it is that kind of an active participation between municipal government and private business. When I retired from the Livingston County Planning Department in April of 2008, I was almost immediately contacted by both the village and the town asking if I would join their respective planning boards. My response was, well, yeah, I probably would consider it, but give me 6 months to sort of decompress before. I ended up joining both boards, although after some research to make sure there wasn't any inherent conflict of interest in serving simultaneously on both the town and village planning board. I researched it, the town attorney researched it, and the village attorney, and we all came to the conclusion, no, we probably could do it. Once I was a member of the town planning board, I began to share concerns with the other planning board members and then with the supervisor and town board members about problems that I saw with the town zoning law. There was a lot wrong with the town of Geneseo zoning law at the time, and since I now was in a position as a member of the town planning board to put forth some of these suggestions, we were able to convince the town board to undertake a comprehensive revision of the town zoning law and to fund it. But kind of in exchange for me pushing this idea and them agreeing that, yeah, it's something important, we'll do it, they came back on me and said, well, you wanted us to do it, okay, we want you to be the project manager for it. And so I kind of said, well, okay, I guess so. I could hardly decline since it was my idea in the first place. We went through a consultant selection process and selected the Steinmetz Planning Group as the consultant for it. And see John sitting in the back row back there. He and Molly Gaudioso from his firm did an excellent job for us, and we were very happy with the choice that we made. We had multiple objectives in doing that comprehensive revision of the town zoning law. Number one, probably to make the zoning law more user-friendly. The town of Geneseo zoning had been one of those laws that gets patched repeatedly over years and over decades, change upon change. There were inconsistencies, there were conflicts, there were things that just did not make sense. We wanted to make it more user-friendly. We also wanted to eliminate a system that was built into the structure of that law of use classes and just do away with that completely. We also wanted to look at what's called the Gateway Overlay District. That is the area where the town borders the eastern edge of the village, and it's the town's designated prime development area. When some zoning laws had been amended to provide for this Gateway Overlay District about a decade ago or a decade and a half, there'd been a lot of good thought given to it, but unfortunately it wasn't integrated very well into the rest of the zoning law, and we really wanted to clean that situation up. Then in addition, we wanted to simply look at implementation of some of the previous plans that the town had worked on, the Town of Geneseo Comprehensive Plan, the Canisius Lake Watershed Management Plan, that was one of the things that I worked on when I was with Livingston County, and then a draft farmland protection plan that I'll touch on in a moment. In general, the town zoning law needed a thorough upgrade and become more modern. We established a steering committee to work with the consultant on it. The town board designated me as chair. Other participants included the supervisor, the town attorney, the code enforcement officer, the chairs of both the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, the town clerk. We also had a representative of the county planning department, their senior planner, and then we had a citizen representative as well. It was a very active steering committee, and my approach from the beginning in designing the process was this would be an ongoing cooperative effort between the town government and the consultant. It was not going to be one of those cases where somebody comes in and provides a draft for you and then you react to it. We were integrally involved in the development of it every stage along the way. Took about 3 years to complete, with a lot of public participation, including one thing that I think we found very useful, and that was a design preference tool to look at some of the issues of site design and what kind of things the steering committee members would prefer to see. And this resulted in some standards that are built into the new zoning law that we can now apply as site plan reviews are done. Project was completed and the town board adopted it in November of 2016. Now, concurrently with the development of the new zoning law, we were also working on the development of a farmland protection plan. As you may or may not know, State Ag and Markets has a grant program that will fund the development of either county or municipal farmland protection plans. Geneseo had put in an application for one of these grants some years previously. It was not initially funded, but then Ag and Markets found extra money available, and they got back to the town board saying, are you guys still interested? Would you like to do it? And the town replied, yes, that they were. I ended up being the project manager of that effort also, again on a volunteer basis. But it made sense for that to happen because there was a lot of overlap in the subject matter and the way you would approach a revision of a zoning law and the kinds of things you would look at in farmland protection. We also ended up hiring the same consultant for that job, Steinmetz Planning Group. And it really worked out well. It made coordination between the recommendations that came out of the farmland plan and what we would build into the new zoning law much easier, made my job as project manager for both much easier. If I'd been dealing with two sets of consultants, things would have gotten very, very complicated. The farmland plan is now completed in a draft form. It's been approved by the County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board, and discussions are ongoing with New York State Ag and Markets. One key result of the Farmland Protection Plan that directly affected the new zoning law was the creation of a new zoning district within the zoning law. A new agricultural zoning district, an AZ district, was created and was applied to certain parts of the town. And at the risk of sounding boring, I'd like to read to you the purpose statement that's built into the zoning law for that agricultural zoning district, because I think that it's very important for our community. The purpose of the AZ district is to implement the agricultural designation in the comprehensive plan to protect predominantly agricultural areas from non-agricultural development pressures, to encourage the continuation of commercial agriculture and the associated operations necessary to support it, to prevent scattered non-farm growth, to reduce land use conflicts, to preserve the town's open space and natural resources. Since agriculture is the intended primary use, the impacts associated with normal, reasonable, and generally accepted farming practices shall not form the basis for violations under any portions of this chapter. We've been told by Ag and Market staff that they've recommended that particular language to other communities that are interested in having a strong policy statement in support of agriculture in their municipal zoning laws.
What is the name of that code again?
It's in the Town of Geneseo zoning law, and this is the purpose statement for our new agricultural zoning district. And I believe that the town clerk's office now has the new code all online. We're still waiting to get it back from the final one in terms of the published code books, but I believe it is still all online. On the village side, we followed a very different process for zoning law revisions or code updates. There, it's been more of an ongoing process. In the years since I've been involved with the Village Planning Board, they have had, as an active part of the village government, a code review committee. And every few years, it goes through a cycle of looking at issues or problems that have come to light with various aspects of the village code, not just zoning, deals with other things as well. But it's been chaired by the woman who was deputy mayor. She did not run for election, so she just left office. And I was very fortunate. We grabbed her, and she's now a large member of the planning board, and I'm quite happy to be able to keep her involved. But she has chaired this code review committee. The standing members have included, in addition to her, me, the code enforcement officer, and the village's deputy clerk treasurer, who also serves as the clerk to the planning board. Then from time to time, we've involved other village staff, the village engineer from MRB, the police chief, and DPW staff as necessary. On an ongoing basis, the village compiles a list of problems or issues that might relate to the village code and potential changes. And then when the list gets sufficiently large or any of them achieve a great deal of importance, the code review committee starts meeting actively. This tends to occur on a 2 to 3 to 4 year cycle. And we've gone through 2 of these in the time since I've been involved with the village. The most recent cycle concluded earlier in the year, and in February, the Village Board of Trustees adopted the package of code changes that the Code Review Committee had proposed. Just to touch briefly on a few of those, the one that I would probably put the emphasis on to start with deals with facades. Village of Geneseo had also been the recipient of a New York Main Street grant several years ago. As part of that grant, we had developed facade design guidelines that would apply to any buildings that receive funding for renovation under the grant. What we looked at and what the village board adopted was to actually incorporate those guidelines by reference into the code, so they're now something that the planning board can use when doing development reviews. So they actually now achieve a force of law. They're not just something that governs how grant funds would be spent. We've also, in the most recent factor, made a number of changes to the sign regulations. And one of them in particular also relates to something Laura mentioned, public art murals. This is something that a lot of design theorists and downtown development promoters say is something that really helps create a walkable, attractive community that attracts people. You want people to use those spaces. In the case of the Village of Geneseo, though, we had a somewhat ambiguous situation, and arguably a mural could have been construed to be defined as a sign and thus limited by all of the the things that you would regulate in sign regulations in a zoning law, placement, dimension, and the like. What we came up with was language which clarified that if a mural or work of public art, it is approved by the Village Board of Trustees, and 2, does not contain any kind of a commercial message, and we're defining that in terms of it can't have the name of a company or a product or contain a logo, then it is not something that would be governed by the sign regulations. We wanted to prevent a problem from occurring before it occurred, because a public mural was proposed and put in place on Main Street a few years ago, and we went back and forth in our minds saying, is that legal or is that not legal? Well, now it's clearly legal, and so we're happy about that. The other change that I would just mention before turning over to Shaun, we also dealt with microbreweries, craft breweries. This is something that has been very popular in recent years. The whole craft brewing industry really has taken off in a lot of places, and it's attracted a lot of people to downtown areas. Well, in the case of the Village of Geneseo, the only area previously that legally a microbrewery or craft brewery could locate was in the area that permitted industrial uses, because it would have been defined as a production activity. Now, that's probably appropriate in the case of a full-scale, large-scale brewing operation, but for somebody who operates something much smaller, it just didn't make sense to us. And so we did a lot of investigating and visited some of these facilities, and what we came up with the assistance of our County Economic Development Office, which was trying to promote craft breweries as a local industry, we now put in effect code changes that will permit these kind of microbreweries to locate in 2 more of our zoning districts, the ones that either incorporate Main Street or the one that incorporates Route 20A, subject to production limits. So the production limits will ensure that a full-scale operation can't go in there, but yet somebody can locate one of these things on Main Street, and then we'll have the benefit of that, excuse me, that kind of commercial activity and traffic generation. In conclusion, the village and town have taken quite different approaches to updating their code, but ultimately they're all looking at the same kind of things, trying to preserve our heritage, whether it's architectural, cultural, agricultural, while still promoting the use by people of our public spaces, trying to promote economic activity, and working with local businesses to move the community in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Shaun is our final speaker. He grew up in Canandaigua. He now lives in Fairport with his wife and children. You're over here on the ground. Pick that up, you can use it. Graduated from, SUNY Albany with a master's degree in urban and regional planning. He's worked all over in applied zoning, planning, permitting, code enforcement in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Florida, and Rhode Island. Today, he is a planning associate with MRB Group here in Rochester, and we're pleased to welcome him to Pittsford.
Again, my name is Shaun. I'm with the MRB Group. I spent the last 15 years of my career in the public sector. I kind of switched over to the private consulting sector, and I worked with various communities around the counties. What I wanted to talk to tonight is about form-based codes, and it kind of echoes on David's and Laurel's topic. And the reason I'm talking about form-based codes is because I know you have specific areas within this village that are critical. And just to echo with the moratoriums that were placed on them. So this is just more food for thought when you're in the comprehensive planning process and updating the zoning code. Could maybe give you some ideas for certain areas.
Can we give people a little bit of background about,
Yeah,
If
I'm
I
gonna-
can segue. Are you
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, no,
talk-
go ahead,
Are you
go-
going to talk about it in your talk? Okay.
You can go ahead.
Traditional zoning was developed in the 1920s in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was basically a strategy to keep residential neighborhoods from becoming industrial or commercial. And most zoning, even in place today, is still based on this concept, basically using numerical numbers for things like setbacks to determine use and determine the size of lots. Form-based zoning recognizes that in a place like the village of Pittsford, the form of the village is part of its character, it's part of its quality of life and real estate values. And that's what form-based codes that Shaun is going to talk about addresses.
Thank you. So we're going to go over quickly, I know, because we want to answer some questions here. What are form-based codes? Why doesn't conventional zoning work? Not that it doesn't work in relation to form-based codes. Key concepts, key components, approaches, examples, and how to implement form-based codes. So one of the most effective land use tools for shaping pedestrian scaled, mixed use, and active urban environments. They often used in new urbanism, village style development, and neo-traditional planning. More concerned with the arrangement and form of buildings than the use that goes within the buildings. And they represent an innovative response to undesirable sprawl. So what is different about form-based codes? They use diagrams and dimensions. They're more prescriptive rather than conventional zoning codes. They specify building, massing, height, relation to the street and public places. They specify street and sidewalk widths. So within a form-based code, it's pretty much all diagrams. So when a developer is, proposing a site plan or a subdivision plan, they know what, it provides a framework because these were all done throughout the visioning process. Why doesn't conventional zoning work? More or less, it employs a one-size-fits-all approach to separate zoning districts. It results sometimes in a mismatch, design elements across neighborhoods. Some limitations on conventional zoning: they separate land uses, they focus on lot size and setbacks, function over form, and promotes a low-density, auto-dependent suburban sprawl. So suburban sprawl development patterns, as you probably are all aware, the low-density outlying developments, auto-oriented, disproportionate massing and scale, incongruent setbacks from traditional neighborhood development. So why do form-based codes make sense? They're prescriptive, they encourage public participation, they enable incremental growth, and they work well in established communities such as village proper. They're easier to understand due to the diagrams and illustrations, and they streamline the permitting process. And lastly, they're enforceable. What are the concepts behind form-based codes? They're based on the physical plan and a shared vision for a specific place or community. Priority on designated form more than the use. And buildings shape the public realm using an urban transect model. The urban transect model is more, say, for a boulevard or something. If you're developing a boulevard or a commercial boulevard, it has different zones, and within those different zones, for example, with rural going into the core, you're going to get higher density, different forms, different design standards. So what are the key components of form-based codes? You have a regulating plan, definitions, public space, street standards, building form standards, and architectural standards, which are sometimes optional and they can be incorporated into the building form standards. So the regulating plan is based on a clear community intentions regarding physical character of an area being coded. The regulatory plan designates key locations or zones where different building form standards apply, such as the waterfront or the water. Exactly. And zones are often on a transect. They don't necessarily have to be on a transect. There's form-based codes that are designated for a specific area within a village, town, city, and so forth. So you don't need to follow the transect model. So the regulating plan, again, looks at network and hierarchy, utility, landscaping, public amenities, building, parks, open space, and the public realm. So what is a public realm? A public realm is pretty much, village proper. It incorporates streets, street trees, sidewalks, street furniture, lighting. So this second component of the form-based code is definitions, and this is very important. It's pretty much an annotated glossary to define the technical terms. Unlike conventional zoning ordinances, pretty much you leave that up for the interpretation of the code enforcement officer. Here it's very easy to identify or clarify. So public street standards and space standards is the third component of form-based codes. They design specifications for elements within the public realm, such as streets, sidewalks, street furniture, parks, drainage, and landscaping. And they incorporate comprehensive design standards. So first, we'll look at small neighborhood streets. Within the Transect or within certain parts of the village will identify, small streets, commercial streets, Main Street, and they'll apply specific design standards for small neighborhood streets, such as narrow width sidewalks, turf belts with shade trees. And then when you get to like say Main Streets, you may have different design standards and a different diagram to help facilitate the design process. And then for downtown commercial streets, you may have a wider sidewalk, say 10 feet to accommodate outdoor seating for restaurants, street trees, lighting, furniture, and on-street parking. And traffic calming measures, Laurel, this one's for you, roundabouts, raised crosswalks, textured crosswalks, bulbouts, chicanes, bike lanes, and street lanes. With sidewalks, you identify the width, the surface, the setbacks based on the different transects. So it's right there in front of you. I mean, it's so when the developer or you're going through the site plan process, you really get no surprises during the design process. Lighting, pedestrian scale lighting, historical preservation. Within the form-based code, you can identify what type of lighting you want. You can provide the designer cut sheets. So when someone comes in for the downtown area, you already know what lighting is going to be going in that area. In street trees, you can identify the type of species you want for a specific area, the planting locations, the spacing based on the land use or transect zone. And this is also incorporate public transit, which train stations or biking or pedestrian trails and so forth. I'm going to go through this quickly. So the last component is building topology. This is building form standards. It controls the building placement, orientation, the features, and the functions such as height, massing, setbacks, and parking and use standards. Some examples would be the building topology and placement, front yard setbacks, build to lines, building heights, frontage, and parking and land use. And again, within the code, you would have specific design criteria, such as in conventional zoning bylaws, you have the land use and dimensional bulk regulations. So building topology is just, breaks it down from different types of uses, from single family down to commercial to industrial. So you'll have different design standards for each one of these typologies. And building placement, it controls the building placement along the street edge and defines the relationship between other buildings. If you have any questions while I'm going through, I know I'm going through this fast. Front yard setbacks, landscaping the edge, exemptions from projections, build two lines. A lot of these photos are from Massachusetts. Build two lines are pretty much, there is no setback requirements. You're building right to the right of way, which creates a more interactive pedestrian movement. So that is a very popular technique within form-based codes within village centers. Building heights. Form-based codes often dictate both minimum and maximum building heights. The potential height is found in a regulating plan and building form standards. I'm not sure you have you have downtown design standards, right? Architectural
We have
standards.
standards for the whole village.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
design standards.
In frontage, flexible lot widths by land use type, which promotes a traditional ownership and land use patterns. In parking, currently I'm working with the town of Waterloo. We just completed their comprehensive plan update, and they had a big concern about parking. So we're working right now with them on some design standards and form-based codes. And one of their big thing was in downtown, they don't have ample parking. So we're working on some shared parking provisions. For example, if a bank is adjacent to a restaurant and you got to meet those certain parking requirements for the restaurant, and if the bank is off hours, we're going to do shared parking. Land use, it's just a couple of images of a downtown, and that's Lowell, Massachusetts. And I won't get into architectural standards because we have, this is more or less is optional. You can put it in the building standards. It's just more or less, makes it very, very precise for what specific zones. For example, if you're in downtown, you have a historical district with different types of design. You can, if you can clearly identify what type of architectural standards you want for specific zones, if that's on the waterfront. So with architecture, you can identify what kind of facades that you would like in your downtown to make sure that it complements your existing fabric. Projections, activates the public realm, improves safety, promotes social interaction. Scale and proportion, use local models and context for building form, window spacing, detailing, and facade composition. Modulate multi-story buildings with separated cornices, string courses, and setbacks. And signs. Form-based codes can also have sign provisions. Flat wall sign, hanging signs only, externally lit, and natural materials. And also standards for windows for specific buildings within the downtown. This doesn't really apply to here. I'm not sure you have too many stoops here.
A few.
Few.
A few.
And what are the approaches to form-based codes? You have quick fixes. You can revise a specific use or a section of the code. Or you can create a special purpose or overlay district, such as the village's performance overlay district. And, or a comprehensive code update, since you're currently in the process of updating your comprehensive plan. You may want to look into instituting some form-based codes. I know you have design standards, but maybe make them a little bit more prescriptive for, say, specific waterfront districts such as Shaun Place. So there's, no surprises down the road. I'm just going to jump ahead here. So what are some examples of how form-based codes work? They work in urban redevelopment, historical preservation, urban infill, adaptive reuse, and build-to lines. So with urban redevelopment, it's consistent with setback, height, scale, bulk, and massing. You can see the before picture. These are all stock pictures. Historical preservation, you can see that before and after, it's consistent. In urban infill, in build-to lines. So how do we implement form-based codes? You can do an existing conditions analysis and inventory, public visioning, or charrettes during the comprehensive planning process, or it doesn't have to be the comprehensive planning process to institute form-based codes, regulatory plan and zones, and develop our urban standards such for street blocks, building placement, height, and land uses, architectural standards, and illustrative standards. So where have form-based codes been successfully implemented? Chicago, Old Town, Alexander, Virginia, and more recently in New York, the town of Malta, specifically for the downtown district, with a concentration on complete street standards. The city of Newburgh, they're focusing on their downtown and waterfront district with form-based codes, and the town of Stillwater, the Route 4 corridor, which I believe is incorporating a Transect model. Sorry, I know I rushed this. I know. So, thank you.
I'm not clear on the relationship between the comprehensive plan update and the writing of the regulating plan. Which comes first, or how does that evolve? I know what you're saying about maybe doing it through a charrette and through community input and that kind of thing. But as we're developing the comprehensive plan, what is going to dictate whether we do a regulating plan or not?
Well, zoning in New York, I mean, New York is a home rule state, so we're not required to do a comprehensive plan, but once we do a comprehensive plan, all zoning has to be in accordance with that comprehensive plan. Right. So when you're thinking of working on a form-based code, you definitely want to do it within the visioning of the comprehensive plan and process.
All right. So right up front, we need to decide whether we want to go that route.
Right, and it's simply within the, when you're looking.
We already kind of have it.
And I clearly understand, you got that performance zoning district.
Yeah.
I'm just, I mean, it could simply just be a goal or an objective within that comprehensive plan. Now, not necessarily you have to do that, it's just a recommendation.
It has to do with how do you deal with the fire department?
Well, first let me mention the DOT part of it. We really were told by someone, and I don't remember who, to ask for the moon. Ask where you would almost be embarrassed to ask for what you're asking for, because you never know what you're going to get. So ask for as much as you dream big, which is what we always do now, dream big. And what was the second part? I'm sorry, first you said the DOT. Oh, well, the DOT actually measured a roundabout in a big lot. Actually, it was, this went off. I was asleep. Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Our fire hall has a very big parking lot, and the DOT came in and measured it out and chalked it out and taped it out and did a whole big roundabout on the ground. And then we asked for the fire trucks, the ladder trucks, semis, 40-foot trailers to do it. Drive in and out, make your turns, see how fast you can go, have fun with it. And we videotaped it. And so that convinced everybody. And actually, it's fine. One of the safety things for the roundabout is the truck apron. And many people don't realize, if you know how it's made up, you have the center island where all the plantings are, makes it beautiful, and then you have the driving place. So it's that stamped concrete, usually a different color between the plantings and the road. And that's really meant, it's a mountable curb. And so when the fire engines come through, first of all, we all know if we were in a big intersection with lights hanging and we saw a fire engine, we wouldn't just park in the middle of the street. We would clear the intersection, right? We just don't stop in the middle of it. So first of all, people have to clear the intersection. So, but even if they don't, let's say they just pull over in the roundabout and don't clear it. The fire engines can fly through the middle, not the middle, but the truck apron middle. And, sometimes people used to say when they were first built, they'd say, people are driving on the stamped concrete. And I'd say, you mean the truck apron? It's meant, you're supposed to drive on it. It's okay. Yes?
Well, some of the other traffic calming plans, issues have been raised about things like raised medians or something different done with walkways.
Yes. Yeah.
How would you?
Here's the thing. You can dilute traffic calming and wind up with a very sorry picture. You won't get the results. It's go all the way kind of thing. Now, I have to say, one thing we didn't do was a median. And it was kind of near that ice cream place I showed you, but the business owners were afraid that they would lose business because people couldn't make a left into their place. Now, we had a roundabout here and a roundabout here, so it would be very easy to go around in either direction. But we listened to their fears, and we figured, okay, we got 90% of the whole thing. So we're okay with that. You just do the whole thing. Don't dilute the results. Do the bulb outs, do all of the great things that go with traffic calming, if you're going to do it.
I live in Pittsford, but not close to the village. I love to come here, particularly Shaun place. You talked a lot about the development of different things to improve the village, but it seems like people who live farther away have less chances to enjoy. There are sometimes probably with parking. I was certainly waiting for some residential development here near Shaun Place, because I would love to sell my house and move here. And nothing was addressed as far as residential developments in the villages or close to the villages. So maybe somebody, and it seems to me that without that, there cannot be a future.
Yeah, do you mind if I grab a little bit of this and I'll pass it down? And then I'll pass it to you. Now that the village has done our Uptown Central Business District, we're working on the west side of the village. It's called the west side. And we have our DPW property there. And it's underutilized, which, the definition of brownfields is really underutilized. It's not necessarily, chemical spill or anything crazy. So we are actually we just put an RFQ out for, we've already done our updated of our comp plan. Now we're going through our zoning. And we are going for higher density residential, like condos, apartments. We know people want to move to the village of Hamburg, and we know people want to age in place and be able to walk around. So we know that we're missing that type of living opportunity. We have lots of residential, or single-family residential. So we are cognizant that people want to live in the center, and we are doing something about that in our planning.
If I can.
Slide or- Okay, from the standpoint of Geneseo, maybe to try to address your question both from the village and then from the town, because they're slightly different answers. Both the village and the town really make use of mixed-use districts. Our downtown, our Main Street, is not a Main Street commercial district or Main Street business district. It is a mixed-use district, meaning a combination of businesses, office use, and residences. Now, that said, Geneseo is a college community, so the residences that tend to be downtown are very definitely student-oriented and are much less focused or targeted at a non-student population. But in the town, too, I mentioned in my remarks the gateway overlay area, the area where the village and the town butt up against each other on the eastern edge of the village. There we also have mixed-use districts with that same combination, commercial, office, and residential, but in different proportions depending upon exactly what gradient in that transition zone you see. So we are very definitely looking for the future for the kinds of developments that might enable somebody both to have the type of residence they want to, as well as being able to walk to shops or to medical appointments and the like. We also have one of our local land development people who is very interested at trying to promote middle to upscale residential development, looking primarily at an older market, often people who may have a SUNY Geneseo connection and would like to come back to that area to live. We haven't really seen any concrete results of that yet, but that is something that we tried to provide for.
Because the speaker addressed the village of Pittsford, one of the reasons we're doing a comp plan is we have some gaps in the fabric of the village and some areas that are probably prone for redevelopment. And one of the things that we want to look at is the possibility of mixed use, including residential on some of these parcels. And not to steal the Comprehensive Plans Committee's thunder, because that's what they're looking at, but it is a topic of interest. Also, we have included on the Comprehensive Plan Committee town residents, because we know we serve the greater Pittsford community as kind of the downtown for greater Pittsford, and that's obviously part of the success of the village is serving that function.
In their own sidewalks? Is that true?
They chose to put in heated sidewalks. Yes, that's true.
They put in their own sidewalks?
Yes, in front of their own building.
That's not a village expense?
No, it's not. No. But the other two questions, I think one was the signage. When we did the Route 62 committee, anyone's familiar with DOT manuals, you know, they're this thick and they're this big. And there is pages and pages on required signage dictated by the state and federal. We actually talked them down off of that crazy amount.
Off of their route signs?
Well, we still have Route 60, there's still signage, there's still Route 62 signs. But there is all kinds of crazy, like, wayfinding, and this is a roundabout, and go this way. And so we have a reduced amount, and I think they probably changed, you know, everything's legal because, you know, they certainly are afraid of people getting hurt and litigation and stuff. So they did their own sign thing, but we have less than they first wanted, yes. And then the other question was the cost of this stuff and the taxes.
Yeah, 9,600 people, how big is the budget and the tax rate?
I have to say, this particular transformation it was a $21 million project funded by the state of New York. This did not come out of our pockets. It did. I mean, it came out of all of our pockets. But it was just simply our turn for a new, they were updating our Route 62. It was worn out, hadn't been done in years. So this is what we did to make it really work for us. We took advantage of an opportunity. So if you go on like the tip list and like, you know, the DOT and the road project list, you just look to see where they're going to be in your community, in your neighborhood. You make sure you go to that meeting and wave your flag. So let's say, for example, the Thruway Authority is going to redo a thruway exit, the Hamburg thruway exit. There's only one thruway exit. And they're taking out the curly parts, and they're just going to go down to a signal and left and right, and that's in the town of Hamburg, not the village. Well, we make sure that we're part of all that talk. Not that we are the town, we are the village, a different municipality, but we want like way sign, we want them to be directed to the historic center. You know, we want to make sure if the project goes toward the village, we want traffic calming, we want, you know, a gateway. So we're constantly waving our own flag and taking advantage of the money that's already being spent. The tax rate, I know, I don't remember.
If I could just add one thing.
Certainly.
A comment on I'll just bellow out, it might be easier. DOT. I agree with everything Laura said about being your own best advocate and the need to wave the flag. That said, I think there has been a change in the attitude of DOT over the decades. When I first began working with them 30 plus years ago, you would get laughed out of the room if you tried to suggest some of these things. I'm not suggesting that they're going to necessarily be enthusiastic, but there is much greater willingness to consider traffic calming, to consider the pedestrian improvements, to consider provision for bicycle lanes. So yes, attend the meetings. Yes, involve yourself in the transportation improvement program process, the TIP process. Be your advocates. But you may be surprised that not all the DOT staff are going to be as resistant as the old boy engineers would have been several decades ago.
Our local DOT actually won a $2 million federal grant because they put in roundabouts which reduced emissions. So they were rewarded. Our state was rewarded from the federal level.
So, and then for David, you talk about I think you're talking about the town plan, and you defined it as user-friendly. What is user-friendly? Is that user-friendly for whom?
When I use that, what I was specifically referencing was that one of our objectives in revising the town zoning law was to make it more user-friendly. And I meant those words in the sense that previously the average person, or even somebody with a professional background in planning or engineering or even law, when they tried to use the Geneseo zoning law, they would just get thoroughly confused. It was a mess. And so we wanted to just get rid of a format that, well, I mean, I was told stories by our town attorney that he would have other attorneys call him up, attorneys who were representing an applicant who was going to come before the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, and they wanted to do their research before coming into the board meeting or submitting an application, and he would end up getting these calls saying, what on earth does this mean? They just failed, they had a great difficulty in negotiating the way that the old zoning law was structured. So that was the basic factor. We had a poorly structured, very confusing, very contradictory law. But the other factor that I want to emphasize, and I may not have touched on this, that when the consultant was redesigning the structure of the law for us, we made much greater use of tables, of tabular formats for presenting uses, for presenting the numerical standards that might apply in each of the zoning districts. And we used a common format for each of the zones. So rather than somebody having to wade through pages and pages of text trying to find out what might affect whether they could legally do this particular type of project or what type of variances they might be faced with approaching the ZBA for. It was all laid out in a much clearer fashion. And so really that's what I was referencing when I talked about user friendliness.
And then finally for Shaun, you talk about, I think you said physical characteristics versus use in your form-based planning. Physical characteristics versus use. So are you saying that in that particular format, you would not regulate use? Use could be whatever would be economic in the area that, as long as the physical characteristics met the neighborhood standard?
Absolutely.
So in other words, so I live on the southwest corner of South Main and Jefferson,
Okay.
which is almost as busy as Route 62, maybe busy, all right? So it would make an excellent gas station. So if it were built in a format, in a way that would look like a great old house, which it is, that would make sense?
Oh, can I tell you, I'm sorry.
That's why we have hybrid.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was just gonna use that same word. We have a hybrid code. We use both. We
Right,
illustrate,
but
but
in what you're saying, is that the case?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's, what location are you?
I live on the southwest corner of South Main and Jefferson.
Okay.
Two state roads.
Yeah, so we're 64 and 96
Okay.
intersecting.
To answer your question, I mean, the form-based code isn't necessarily, prescriptive for every location. I mean, it is just more as a design guideline based on input from, citizens on what, how it should fit the fabric. So to answer your question, I'm not sure if that's like the best use or retrofit.
Would be the best use as far as I'm concerned. It'd be very lucrative, I would guess. But, so that was my question though. Use, you said it's essentially physical characteristics as opposed to use, right?
Yes.
That was my thought.
And if I can piggyback on Laura's comment, I would not characterize either the Village of Geneseo or the Town of Geneseo's zoning law as being a form-based code, certainly not in any pure sense. However, as she said, there are degrees of hybrids, and I think increasingly in zoning laws today, a community will pick and choose those things that they think are appropriate. Many of the things that Shaun outlined in his presentation that a form-based code would look at, if some of those things make sense to you for your community, you can incorporate them in other ways in your own zoning law. So it's not an all or nothing situation.
Right.
You can pick and choose those things that you think are appropriate.
Yep, just another tool.
Right.
We have time for one more question, I think, because we're supposed to be up soon, so. Put your hand up.
I'm interested in the intersection of historic district and these other things, since our whole village is an historic district. Because form-based seem to say you don't talk about the way it described how things look. I'm not sure how it fits with the historic district, so that's what I'm. How do we leverage?
Well, I mean, with a historic district, I mean, you have state standards and federal standards that you got to follow. So, it's just with the architectural standards that you put in place in that form-based code, it just helps facilitate the design process on the developer's standpoint. It more or less streamlines the process.
So that really applies to development, not what's currently there. If we had new development.
It's more geared for redevelopment, infill development, and so forth. Correct.
But it also can affect, as a building owner or business might make changes to an existing structure, an existing facade, that, and it's a tool that your planning board can certainly work with, that yes, it's something they will have to examine through the secret process, and depending upon the particular regulations that might apply, SHPO might weigh in, and you can open up the process and make sure that these other considerations are given active voice.
Shaun, I have one question for you.
Sure.
I've noticed in Massachusetts that when you step off the curb, everybody stops. What's the difference? Why doesn't it happen here?
Massachusetts is, yep, in Massachusetts, someone will be going 40 miles an hour down the road, and they'll stop just to let a car out. And which is great, but not for the car behind them.
I thought Laura really made a very astute comment, though. Geneseo has a number of crosswalks across our main street. And if you step out there in one of those crosswalks, some cars may be obedient and automatically come to a stop, but you make eye contact. You stare, even if you can't see through the glass, even if there's reflection, you look right through where you know the driver's eyes are, and I'm here. You have to stop, and they generally do.
And the slower their speed is, the greater chance you
Absolutely.
have to block their
Definitely,
eyes.
yeah. It's definitely interactive.
Yes.
Some education of both the pedestrian and the motorist. Because you see pedestrians sometimes that don't even take a step. They'll stand there, you slow down because they're standing at the crosswalk, but they don't have one foot in the crosswalk.
Yeah.
You slow down, or you're trying to be the nice guy, and they're not going.
Actually, I'll have a pedestrian, they'll I'm stopping at the crosswalk to let them go, and they'll try to wave me on. And I'm like, no, you go first. I'm waiting. You go first. And it's really a conversation, and I'm not kidding. That's just what happens. Nope, you have the right of way, not me.
Are there any other questions? This has been very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Laura, Shaun, and David, we really appreciate you coming.